Hello and welcome to Langley Free Church's Thought for the Week. This week our thought comes from Andy Perryman, the pastor at Slough Baptist Church, and he's reflecting on things that changed over half term. So over to Andy.
What have people been up to with their half term? And perhaps it's not quite been the plans that you may have originally made. But we're going to have our Bible reading, which comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 8.
For everything that happens in life, there is a season, a right time for everything under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to collect the harvest, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to cry, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to scatter stones, a time to pile them up, a time for a warm embrace, a time for keeping your distance, a time to search, a time to give up as lost, a time to keep, a time to throw out, a time to tear apart, a time to bind together, a time to be quiet, a time to speak up, a time to love, a time to hate, a time to go to war, a time to make peace. I know everything God does endures for all time. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken away from it. We humans can only stand in awe of all God has done. What has been and what is to be already is, and God holds accountable all the pursuits of humanity.
So I didn't prime you for this, Matt, but hopefully it's not too difficult a question. Matt, what were you up to for half term?
I have kids, so they were off school. My wife's a teacher, so she was off enjoying half term, not enjoying so much the rain. Kind of makes it a bit tricky with kids to do much when you're stuck inside. But yeah, had a few days off work, nice week. Despite all the weirdness going on, managed to have some time off work, which is always a bonus.
Cool. Our plans for half term have changed about 15 times from what we were meant to be doing. The initial plan for what we were going to do as half term is Kate and I were going to have a holiday without the children. So thank you, that needed enthusiasm. We were going to be going abroad with some friends. That was very exciting. And then it looked like the country we were meant to be going to, we wouldn't be able to visit. So we said, it's okay, we'll look for somewhere else that we could go that's acceptable. And we'll book a last minute break. Never done that before. I'm a planner. So this was going to stretch me, but also be exciting in another way. And then with everything going on, my parents, who were meant to be providing the childcare, said, look, we don't think we're going to be able to do that. We can't come and do that. So it was all kind of then cancelled. And then my aunt said, I was going to come up for the weekend and help with childcare, so I'll come up anyway and spend the weekend with you, and you're going to do a bit of babysitting and take Luke out for the day. And then just before half term, Isabel, our middle child, we got a phone call from school saying there'd been a COVID case in her class and she had to come home and isolate for 2 weeks, which ended yesterday. So our initial plans and what actually happened turned out to be very different. So my saying for this week is that when life gives you lemons, paint the lounge instead. So we did some decorating. which no one gets to see for probably about 12 months. So if you come to our house at some point when that's allowed again, you have to ooh and ah at the lounge to make me feel good about the way that we spent our half term. And I say all that because there's lots of points within this where I've been very grumpy about the change of plans and that what we'd wanted to do and hoped that we could do had not happened. But I'm challenged and encouraged by that reading we just heard, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, reminding us that there's a time for everything. The truth is, we can't just do one thing. We've had a chance to rest and stop, and for kids to not be at school for this last week. But if when you go back to school tomorrow, if you go back and behave as though you're still on half term, things will not go very well for you. I'm sure you would realise. Sometimes we may not like the season that we find ourselves in. We may not like having to be at home. We might feel really excited about going into some different places. For some, I know you may be looking forward to going back to school tomorrow. I suspect Isabel is looking forward to finally being out of the house regularly again. But sometimes we have to accept that we're in a different season, a different time from what we might like. I enjoy the way that some of those things from Ecclesiastes chapter 3 are really relevant for us today. It talks about a time to be silent and a time to speak. And we can get that sometimes there are times where it's time to be quiet and where it's time to speak. If you get it wrong when you're in a library or during a test, you might quickly realise that you've made the wrong choice about when it was time to be quiet or time to speak. And I wonder if the writer of Ecclesiastes was a little bit ahead of his time when he said there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to hug and a time not to. Right now is probably the time for not hugging, certainly with people outside of your household. But there's a little bit in Ecclesiastes that again is an encouragement. Verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." Somehow, in this time for everything, God's able to make everything beautiful in its time. And as we've come back to again and again, in different ways during this time, we know that God is able to work all things for the good of those who love him. Somehow God's able to work for good with us and for us and in us. But let us remember, even in this time, in this season, that many of us may well not want to be in and be looking forward to the end of it, that God is able to still use these times and still able to work for good, still able to make everything beautiful in its time. Bizarrely enough, that's what he's done with my lounge this week. Well, I'd like to say so, if I do say so myself.
Is it lemon coloured? Were you inspired by lemons to...
No,
okay.
but that would have been a nice twist. We're going to sing, and we're going to recognise once again that God is able to work, even when we're struggling, even when things are difficult. God is able to work for good and to bring light into darkness. Let's sing together, My Lighthouse.
In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence you won't let go. In the questions your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore. I won't fear what tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing. My God's love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore. Far before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms. Far before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms. Far before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms. Far before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore, safe to shore,